Guys, I'm here in front of the bunkie under the overhang because it just started raining immediately after my friend Michael here just showed up. He's from Sansin, which is a company we've been recommending for a couple years now, and he's here to kind of give us a quick demo and a quick explanation of what do you do prior to ordering your stain, what do you do when you actually are ready to treat your bunkie and then stain it, and then what do you do after to maintain and make sure your bunkie looks amazing. Now, this bunkie here in front of us, this is my 2019 kind of model, but I built it actually as a prototype back in 2017. And I applied the other guy's terrible product, would not recommend. For liability reasons, I can't mention the product name, but it might rhyme with Momsen Hotter Seal. And really unhappy with the results I got. So I've actually sanded it off. Now, is that, Michael, is that in your opinion, is that the first step?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So when we usually have customers working with new wood, typically you're working with mill glazed surfaces.
What does mill glaze mean?
Right, so when the mill processes the wood through the planer, it leaves planing marks on the surface, and typically you see little lines that are about a couple millimeters apart, perpendicular to the grain,
right.
And it has a tendency to basically create a surface where not even water really wants to penetrate the surface of the wood.
Yeah, it's kind of shiny, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how you can tell it's mill glaze, right.
So there's a couple different ways to basically get rid of it. Mechanically, we find is the best method, and sanding with 60 or 80 grit paper is the best and most effective way to remove the mill glaze. So
yeah,
that's how you start off.
I use an orbital sander on that.
Yeah, random orbital is exactly the way to go. Yeah, and we recommend 60 to 80 grit. Anything higher than 80 may polish the surface and make it difficult for the product to really absorb properly into the wood.
Because the lower the grit, the more it kind of bites in, right?
Right, the more aggressive it is, exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's all I got to do is basically sand the kit?
Yeah.
And well, I do this after it's built, most likely, right?
Yeah, absolutely, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I've built my bunkie, I've sanded it down. What's the next step?
Right, so then we have a choice of products that you could apply and colors. For these types of vertical surfaces, we're keen on applying the SDF product. It's a penetrating finish. We recommend 2 coats of SDF on vertical surfaces. And it's a penetrating finish, like I had mentioned, so it does well with any sort of moisture that's potentially in the wood, but it also allows the wood to breathe. It helps to eventually stabilize the wood, and it's very good at repelling water and snow, and also it has a very good UV package in the product.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So essentially, I'm just going to put that on. Now, what can I use? Would this be a regular brush? Or,
right, yeah. So for a surface like this, for example, what you could do is use like a little garden sprayer and spray the product on in a flood coat fashion and back brush it.
Well, I don't know what a garden sprayer is, but I got this thing right here.
Yeah, these guys work okay. Yeah, yeah.
Wagner Power Painter.
Power Painter, there you go.
Yeah.
As long as you're flooding the product onto the surface, a wet coat is the equivalent of 6 or 7 wet mills. So we want to flood it onto the surface, and then you back brush any excess product.
Okay. Okay, that sounds technical, but I think what I'm getting at is you spray it on really thick, and then if anything drips, you brush off the drips.
Exactly. Let it run, and then just back brush any excess product. Exactly.
Okay. So now this SDF, does it come in just like clear? Is it clear an option?
Right. So the SDF product is available in our full color line.
Okay.
So we have 4 different color categories, everything from a natural up to a solid color. And you could also have the option of using a product called SDF Foundation. So SDF Foundation could be used in situations where your client might want a really natural looking finish.
Yep.
And it would create basically like a foundation layer where the subsequent coat over top looks lighter because it's not penetrating as much into the wood, and you're not getting as much color depth out of the second coat. So it just looks like a lighter finish.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could use SDF Foundation first, and then SDF tinted to the standard color.
Okay.
What you could also use is SDF Top Coat to increase the sheen of the finish a little bit, and increase the durability as well too.
And that would be like as a final coat?
Yep. You could use the SDF Top Coat as a final coat.
So in this case of that, would you do 2 coats of SDF and then 1 coat of top coat, or would you just do 1 and 1?
2 coats of SDF are great. That's the recommendation. What you could do is use 1 coat of SDF and then 1 coat of SDF top coat if you want a little bit more luster, a little bit more sheen, and more weather repellency. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And when you say any color, like my daughter's a big pink fan.
Yeah.
Can you do pink?
Yeah. So our dealers, have the capability of creating custom colors,
Really?
and that's what empowers a Sansin dealer to be able to do for a customer, is that we can make custom colors.
Yeah.
That could be a possibility.
Okay, I went to Orangeville Building Supply Company today to pick up their Sansin dealer. It's close to me, and they had a decent number of colors available, but they said if you want to tint any color, you have to kind of order a couple days in advance. Is that the standard?
Yeah, that's unusual because most dealers are tinting on site.
Okay.
Orangeville Building Supply orders the product in pre-tinted. So
Oh, okay.
in your case, if you're looking for a custom color, you need to find a dealer that has a pigment dispenser on site.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. No, I ended up buying kind of like a natural cedar look. I think that's going to look great on this particular bunkie. A lot of people just like the natural. That's what I bought right there.
Good color, natural
Yeah.
cedar.
Yeah.
Very good color.
So I'm not taking any risks with my bunkies, but if you want to go pink, go for it. There's a customer last year that did like the Bunkie Life kind of turquoise color, which I thought was pretty
That's
awesome.
a great color, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, is there any other questions about the actual application process? Like, is it relatively straightforward? If I've painted a house, I can paint this?
So, soap and water cleanup, really nice products to use. They don't smell, very nice to work with. They absorb naturally and nicely into the wood. And then for maintenance, down the road, you're going to be observing for some color fading, a little bit of wear off the surface of the wood. So, in 4 to 6 years, you may want to consider doing a maintenance coat, and at that point, it's no more difficult than just to wash the surface with Sansin multi-wash, and then reapply a fresh coat. So very easy to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were also telling me about the other thing, the ENS line.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like the super.
Yeah,
it's mega top coat, right?
It's an upgrade.
Okay.
If you're looking for an increased sheen, you could look at using the ENS product. It's an elastomeric film build finish, 2 coats. And it'll definitely increase the sheen of the surface, and plus it'll also increase the durability of the surface as well too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you put on 2 coats of SDF and then 2 coats of ENS?
Yeah, if you're going to use ENS, what you could very well do is just use 1 coat of the SDF product and then 2 coats of ENS afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I did notice the price tag on that ENS was a little higher.
Yeah,
than the
absolutely.
Other stuff.
Yeah. Great point. I mean, it has. So first of all, it has very high solids, right? So you're getting a lot more in the can.
Yeah.
And secondly, ENS could very well cover anywhere from 400 to 600 square feet, especially if you're using it over top of an existing coat of SDF.
Okay.
So your per square foot cost of applying it is
about the
actually much less than SDF.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So there's a very high value proposition there with the ENS product.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and just about as a guesstimate, and we don't need to quote you on this, Mike, but how many cans of SDF would I need to finish a bunkie of this size?
Yeah, so there should be no guesswork.
Okay.
What you're looking at is the product data sheet, which gives you a guideline for the absorption rate.
Yep.
And you should be looking at somewhere between 300 square feet on average per gallon.
Yep.
It could be plus or minus depending on the porosity of the wood, the moisture content of the wood.
How much I spill?
Yeah, sure, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and how much you overspray, right? So but say 300 square feet is kind of the ballpark.
Okay.
Plus or minus.
Okay, cool.
So
you can kind of do that little bit of math. There's some weird triangles and things like that in the bunkie that make it a little a bit of a math trigonometry or I should say geometry puzzle. But for the most part, I think 2 cans ought to do me. That's my guesstimation.
we'll find out.
Yeah, I bought 3 just because I don't like to go to the hardware store more than I have to. But I bought 3. I'm gonna do my bunkie with SDF first, and I think you might have sold me on the ENS.
Mm-hmm.
So I might be adding. So just to clarify, 2 coats of the ENS.
Yeah.
Over top of 1 coat of SDF
Correct.
should do it. If I do 2 coats of SDF, am I super overkilling it?
Not at all. I mean,
okay.
the more product, the better the UV performance, the better the durability. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna super overkill it and go 2 coats SDF today, or probably not today because it started raining as soon as Mike got here. But when it stops raining, I'm gonna get 2 coats of SDF on. I'm gonna film the process. So tell me more about where to get the product and who to talk to.
Yeah, so we have a dealer locator on the website. You just punch in your postal code or zip code.
Okay.
And
that's Sansin.com, right?
Sansin.com.
SANSIN.
There you go. SANSIN.
Right.
And use our dealer locator.
Okay.
And you'll find the latest and greatest products at your Sansin dealer.
You guys are pretty much all over the place, right?
Yeah, we're all throughout North America.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Awesome. Well, is there anything in closing that you want to make? Like, I mean, in my experience, there are some really terrible products out there and not a whole lot of great ones. And I really like how you guys are, Canadian-based. You're approachable, right? You guys are actually, like, we were recommending Sansin before they actually approached us. So, like, during the contest this year, we got an email and they said, hey, like, I've noticed you're recommending our product. Let's talk. So that's kind of what led to today. But one thing I always like to say is, like, our goal at Bunkie Life is to get you guys the information you need to make the best decision. So obviously there are other products out there,
sure,
but we recommend Sansin for a variety of reasons. We don't take any kickbacks. We just think it's the best product that you have. So anything else you want to close with?
I mean, we're very proud of what we do, and we take a lot of pride in it, and we've been doing this for the better part of 30 years, so we continue to push the envelope with coatings technology and making the best finish in its category.
Okay, great. Well, I think it's that's a wrap. I really appreciate your time so much for coming, and yeah, we'll see. We'll if we have any other questions, we'll reach out.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All the best. All right. So I'm here at my bunkie, and I want to basically show you guys what not to do. I built this bunkie, like I said, in 2017, and didn't know what I was doing. I just threw on the other guy's product, a really cheap product that you know, was cheap, and I got what I paid for. So very quickly, my bunkie turned gray in about a year. Okay, let me show you. So this is kind of like what I've sanded here. This is more or less what it looks like naturally. And then this behind here is what it looked like after about a year. See this like horrible graying? I'm excited that I can sand that out, but it's going to be a lot of work. So avoid that work. Yes, you do need to sand your bunkie to get the stain applied properly. However, you won't have to sand out a ton of gray if you do it right. So Michael was telling me that, you know, I've sanded this front area here, but tell me more about.
Yeah, so
you know,
if like some people would consider this a sanded surface ready to go, although when we
some
look
people
at
like
it,
me, like
when we look closely, you'll see, you know, patches of unsanded areas. And I mean, really what's going to happen here is that you're going to get a performance difference between well sanded versus not sanded so well.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll look blotchy long term. You won't get as even absorption initially as well too. So
Okay.
it'll look more beautiful and it'll perform more evenly if it's been sanded evenly.
Okay, so what you're saying is I got a lot more work cut out for
A
me.
little bit more. Yeah.
Okay, so awesome. So that's going to be my job for the rest of the day probably, or maybe even more. And yeah, that's basically the process there. And then once it's completely sanded, you were talking about how once you sand it, get the stain on quickly, right? Don't leave it for a while.
Yeah, we don't want to be waiting more than 2 weeks
Yep.
to get a coating on a freshly sanded surface because the wood will start, you know, tightening up again.
Yep.
You could lose as much as 50% adhesion if you're waiting too long.
Okay.
So the sooner you can get the stain on after sanding it, definitely the better.
Okay, great. So we will we'll get on that. And once again, don't do what I do. Buy Sansin, not the other guys. Okay.
Cool.
Awesome. All right. So sanding, I'm just using a classic orbital sander with I think a 60 grit, and this is actually a stripping. I don't know what they call this, but pad, I will call it. And I got this from my local timber mart. I also got the sander from my local timber mart. And I'm basically going to take this thing down to no gray at all, is the plan. Alright, so I still have a crap load of sanding to do, but I've kind of carved out this front door here as a perfectly sanded piece, and Mike is gracious enough to do some of my painting for me. Or I guess staining, we should call it, right? Yeah. So as he puts on his Sansin official apron, does not come with the paint, unfortunately. He's shaking it up.
When did you buy the product? Just
today.
They shook it?
They did not shake it.
They did not shake it, okay. Let's see what shape we're in here. So we want to make sure that we're stirring the product well because it can settle. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Okay.
And it can settle out. So you either want to drill mix it if it's a pail, or just use what do you call it?
Stir stick.
Yeah.
Yeah, the old stir stick.
Yeah, there you go. So we'll just make sure we get stirred up well here before you apply any product.
They didn't give me a stir stick either.
Yeah, so we'll have to find something here, and we'll get some product on.
Okay, let me pause this. So I bought the wrong kind of brush. Tell me about the brushes.
Yeah, so the brush will make a big difference just in terms of efficiency, right?
Yep.
So we recommend chinex bristle brushes,
Okay.
opposed to your typical polyester nylon bristle brush. The chinex bristle holds a lot more products. You're not having to re-dip as much. Plus, it allows you to work with a wet edge, which is critical to flood coating the product. So when you're flood coating it, and you'll see in just a moment, it's easy to work with the product when you have a nice wet edge, but when you're dry brushing it out, it just makes it much more difficult to really get the product into the wood with a brush that's not loading up and unloading into the wood. So
this is the Chinex brush in your left hand there.
Chinex bristle
Okay,
brush.
cool.
You can even see, the bristles are pulling up product.
Okay, right.
Yeah, it just really loads up nicely. And once again, I didn't realize how big of a surface we were going to be working with here.
Sure.
Otherwise, I would have brought a nice 6-inch brush.
Yep.
So here I have a little 1.5 inch.
That's cool.
And it'll do the trick. So what you want to do is make sure you're putting it on nice and heavy to the point of refusal. We're going to have to re-dip frequently here. You really load it up. You can see how it's just dripping down the surface of the wood.
Okay.
All right. So if you're working with a very large surface, you're going to want to work from the bottom up, because if you're working from the top down, like let's see, I was working up there, right? And
Yeah.
I get drip marks all over here. By the time I actually get around to the surface,
it's going to be dry.
It's going to be dry. I'm putting on the first coat, and then technically it's going to be like a second coat in those spots. So like that right there, right? So you want to just make sure that you're saturating it to the point of refusal, working your way up the wood. Just look much more consistent.
And if I'm using a paint sprayer, then it's just a matter of loading into the can. I don't need it to water it down or anything like you would a paint. No, okay.
Yeah, you're definitely not diluting the product. Just putting it on straight from the can.
Okay.
Yeah. You can see how much easier this would be if I had a nice big wide brush, right? So,
yep.
Yeah. And this is a really nicely prepped surface, so it's nice and absorbent, really pulling the product in. If it weren't sanded well, the product would kind of just smear on the surface. You might even get streaks and runs. This way it's pulling in very nicely. I always work with the grain of the wood. I was very tempted to go across the grain there for a second, but I always go with the grain of the wood.
Okay.
Back brush your excess product. There you go. So you may not notice behind the camera, but or behind your screens, but working with the product here, there's no smell to it. It's a very nice, pleasant product to work with.
I can confirm. Smells like daisies.
There you go. And the soap and water cleanup. So nice penetrating oil finish, or I should say waterborne alkyd. So this is a natural oil that we're using that's highly modified to be water soluble. So we're not working with a water-based product here. We're working with a highly modified alkyd that penetrates like a true oil, because it is, and yet it's using water as a vehicle. Therefore, it's soap and water cleanup. So wonderful product to work with. Something we should mention, and we're not faced with it today, and thankfully we're working over a canopy, but you definitely don't want to be working with the product in any sort of direct sunlight. What can happen is it'll flash dry on the surface, meaning it won't have a chance to penetrate if there's a direct sunlight on it or heat of the day.
Okay.
So we want to be working on a nice, cool, shaded day like we are today. We got fortunate. If it's hot outside, it could flash dry, and then therefore it may not penetrate as much, and it could potentially crack, chip, and peel if it doesn't penetrate into the wood.
Okay, that's good advice. So like a morning.
Early in the morning, later in the day, or work with the exposure, right? So if the sun's coming up from behind the monkey, you could be working on the front side, right, during the day, and then just work around it.
Makes sense.
Opposite to the sun. Nice color, eh?
Yeah, this is the natural cedar, and I'm excited. This is going to be great with the red roof, I think. So what do you charge an hour, Mike?
Case of beer and a Porsche.
Okay. All right, got the case of beer.
There you go.
All right, brilliant. Well, I'm looking forward to finishing this one off, and we're probably going to do it over the next couple of days. Any other tips in terms of application or?
I think we've pretty much covered it. Just to recap, put it on nice and heavy to the point of refusal. Back brush your drips, of course. Work from the bottom up if you're working with a very large surface. Using a sprayer is great, as long as you're back brushing afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, and
what's the dry time before you're no longer able to back brush?
Yeah, I mean, your dry time to the touch could very well be around, 40 minutes, an hour or so, depending on how humid it is, right? So, if you're getting drips, you want to come back within the first 10-15 minutes or so. You don't want to be leaving them any longer, because then it starts getting a little tacky.
Yep.
Yeah, so you want to work with it while it's still open and quite fluid. So,
okay.
And then if you're doing a second coat, anything between 12 and 24 hours, depending on the humidity and the temperature, should be ripe for getting the second coat on.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. There we go.
Awesome, man.
Looks good.